Christmas Eve had arrived in the small, snowy town, bringing with it the warm glow of holiday lights and the cheerful sounds of celebration. The streets were decorated with red ribbons and golden ornaments hanging from lampposts, and soft white snow covered the sidewalks like a blanket. Inside the houses that lined the quiet streets, families were gathered together. Through the windows, warm golden lights shone brightly, revealing decorated Christmas trees filled with ornaments and twinkling lights. Children laughed as they opened gifts. Parents prepared warm meals in the kitchen, and the comforting smell of baked cookies drifted through the air. It was the kind of evening people waited all year for, an evening filled with warmth, laughter, and family. But outside those glowing windows, the winter night told a very different story. The cold air moved quietly through the empty streets as snowflakes slowly fell from the dark sky. The cheerful sounds of celebration faded as the town grew quieter, and the narrow alleys between buildings became dark and lonely. Behind a row of small shops near the edge of town, a dimly lit alley stretched between two brick buildings. The alley was mostly empty, except for a large metal trash container sitting near the wall. Beside that container sat two small girls. They were twins. Their names were Mia and Lily, only 5 years old. The girls sat very close together, their small shoulders touching as they tried to stay warm in the freezing winter air. Their coats looked worn and thin, not nearly strong enough to protect them from the cold snow that continued falling around them. Their small boots rested in the snow-covered ground, and their hands were red from the icy wind. Mia wrapped her arms around her sister's shoulders as if trying to shield her from the cold. They had been sitting there for a long time. Earlier that evening, they had wandered through the town, hoping to find somewhere safe to go. But instead of kindness, they had heard cruel words from someone passing by. "Nobody wants you." The voice had been loud and angry. The words had cut deeper than the freezing wind. Now those words echoed quietly in the girls' minds as they sat beside the trash container. Mia tried to stay brave. She gently hugged Lily tighter. "It's okay," she whispered softly. But both girls knew the truth. Mia was only trying to comfort her sister. Inside, she felt just as scared. Across the snowy street, a faint sound slowly began echoing through the quiet town. At first, it was distant, a low rumbling sound that grew louder as it moved closer. The sound of motorcycles. The deep roar of powerful engines broke the silence of the snowy road as a group of bikers rode slowly through the town. Their headlights cut through the falling snow while their tires rolled steadily across the icy street. At the front of the group rode a tall biker named Jack. Jack was hard to miss. He was tall and broad-shouldered, the thick beard and a worn black leather biker jacket covered with patches from years of riding with his club. The patches represented places he had traveled and people he had helped along the road. Behind him rode several other bikers, all part of a Christmas charity ride that had taken them through many towns that day. Their mission was simple: deliver gifts to local shelters and bring a little holiday kindness to people who needed it most. Boxes of toys and warm blankets were strapped to the back of their motorcycles. Even in the cold winter night, their ride carried a sense of purpose. But as Jack rode past the dark alley behind the shops, something caught his attention. At first, he almost missed it. Two small shapes sitting beside the trash container. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. He slowed his motorcycle. The bikers behind him noticed immediately and reduced their speed as well. Their headlights illuminated the alley for just a moment. And that was when Jack saw them clearly. two tiny girls sitting alone in the snow. On Christmas Eve, Jack's heart sank. Children should never be sitting alone in a dark alley like that. Not tonight. Not on Christmas. Jack slowly pulled his motorcycle to the side of the road. The other bikers followed, their engines rumbling as they parked behind him. Snowflakes drifted through the light of the street lamps as the motorcycles came to a stop. Jack removed his helmet and looked toward the alley again. The two girls were still sitting there, small, cold, and completely alone. Something deep inside Jack told him this moment wasn't part of their planned charity ride, but it might be the most important stop of the entire night. He stepped off his motorcycle and began walking toward the alley. Because sometimes the road leads you exactly where you're needed most. Jack slowly brought his motorcycle to a stop near the entrance of the narrow alley. The rumble of the powerful engine faded as he turned the key, and the sudden quiet of the snowy night returned once again. Snowflakes continued drifting gently from the dark sky, settling across the road and the parked motorcycles. Behind Jack, the other bikers slowed down as well. One by one, their bikes rolled to a stop along the side of the street. The line of motorcycles stretched across the snowy road, their headlights glowing softly in the cold winter air. The riders looked toward Jack with curious expressions. They had been riding together all evening during their Christmas charity run, stopping at shelters and community centers to deliver gifts. But Jack's sudden stop had clearly caught their attention. Jack removed his helmet slowly and placed it on the seat of his motorcycle. Then he looked toward the alley again. The two small girls were still sitting beside the metal trash container. They hadn't moved. From where he stood, they looked even smaller than before. For a moment, Jack simply stood there, studying the scene quietly. Two tiny figures, alone in the snow. On Christmas Eve, he had seen many difficult things during his years riding across different towns and cities. But something about this moment felt different. No child should ever feel this alone. Jack took a slow breath and began walking toward the alley. His heavy boots crunched softly against the snow as he moved carefully forward. Behind him, the other bikers remained near their motorcycles, watching silently. They trusted Jack's instincts. If he had stopped the ride, there was a reason. As Jack approached the girls, he made sure his movements were slow and calm. He didn't want to frighten them. The twins looked up as they heard his footsteps. Their small faces were pale from the cold, and their wide eyes watched him nervously. Mia immediately tightened her grip on Lily's hand. The two sisters sat close together as if they were each other's only protection against the cold world around them. Jack stopped a few feet away. Then he slowly lowered himself down onto one knee so he could speak at their level. His large frame looked much less intimidating when he knelt like that. "Hey there," he said gently. His voice was calm and warm, carrying a kindness that was very different from the cold wind blowing through the alley. The girls didn't respond right away. They simply watched him. Jack offered a small, reassuring smile. "Are you two all right?" he asked softly. Lily looked down at the snow for a moment. Then she slowly shook her head. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "No." Jack's expression softened. The word was simple, but it carried a quiet sadness that made his chest tighten slightly. "Are you lost?" Jack asked carefully. Mia glanced at her sister before answering. "We're waiting," Lily whispered. Jack tilted his head slightly. "For who?" he asked. The twins looked at each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snowflakes drifted through the dim alley light while the quiet winter night surrounded them. Finally, Mia spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. "For someone who wants us." The words hit Jack harder than he expected. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. No child should ever believe something like that. Behind him, one of the bikers shifted slightly near the motorcycles, having heard the conversation. Jack slowly looked at the two girls again. They weren't crying. They weren't shouting. They were simply waiting. Waiting for someone who cared enough to notice them. Jack felt something heavy settle in his chest. The girls' coats looked thin and worn. Their hands were red from the cold. And yet they were still sitting there quietly, hoping someone would come. Jack spoke gently again. "How long have you been here?" Lily shrugged slightly. "A while," Mia added softly. "We thought maybe someone would come." Jack glanced briefly toward the bright windows of the houses across the street. Inside those homes, families were celebrating Christmas together. But here in the alley, two little girls were sitting beside a trash container, believing nobody wanted them. Jack looked back at them. Something inside him made a decision right then. Their Christmas Eve wasn't going to end in that cold alley. Not tonight. Not while he was there. For a moment, the quiet alley remained completely still. Snow continued, falling slowly from the dark sky, settling softly on the ground around them. The faint glow of the streetlight above reflected off the snowflakes as they drifted through the cold winter air. Jack stayed kneeling in front of the two girls. Mia and Lily sat quietly beside the metal trash container, their small shoulders touching as they tried to stay warm. Jack looked at them gently. He could see the exhaustion in their tiny faces. Their eyes looked tired. Their coats were thin, and the cold winter wind was growing stronger as the night went on. Jack spoke softly again. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The twins looked at each other for a moment before answering. Lily spoke first. "Our mom is at the hospital." Jack's expression changed slightly. "What happened?" he asked. Mia lowered her eyes toward the snow. "She got very sick today," she explained quietly. "They took her in an ambulance." Jack felt his chest tighten a little. That explained why the girls were alone. "Do you have anyone else?" Jack asked gently. "A relative? A neighbor? Someone you can stay with?" Both girls slowly shook their heads. "No," Lily whispered. For a moment, Jack didn't speak. The alley felt colder than before. Two 5-year-old girls, alone on Christmas Eve, waiting beside a trash container. Across the street, laughter could still be heard faintly from houses where families were celebrating together. But here in the alley, the world felt very different. Jack slowly stood up. He brushed the snow from his knee and turned his head toward the street, where the other bikers were waiting beside their motorcycles. The group had been watching the scene quietly. Most of them had already heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. Jack met their eyes. He didn't say anything for a moment. But sometimes words aren't necessary. One biker nodded slowly. Another folded his arms and looked toward the girls. A third biker quietly shook his head in disbelief. They all understood. Two children had nowhere to go on Christmas Eve. Jack took a slow breath and turned back toward Mia and Lily. The girls looked up at him nervously, unsure what would happen next. Jack knelt down again so he could speak to them at eye level. "You know something?" he said gently. The twins watched him carefully. "You're not spending Christmas Eve out here." The girls looked confused. They exchanged a quick glance with each other. Lily tilted her head slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. Jack smiled. It was the kind of smile that made the cold alley feel a little warmer. "You're coming with us," he said. The girls blinked in surprise. "With you?" Mia asked. Jack nodded. He pointed toward the street where the motorcycles were parked. The row of bikes gleamed under the streetlights while the bikers waited nearby. "We're delivering Christmas gifts tonight," Jack explained. "Food, blankets, toys." He paused. "And we've got room for 2 more guests." For a moment, the twins didn't know how to react. They had been sitting there for hours believing nobody wanted them. Now suddenly someone was offering to help. Mia squeezed Lily's hand. "Really?" Lily asked softly. Jack nodded again. "Really?" Behind him, one of the bikers waved gently toward them. Another biker lifted a small gift box from the back of his motorcycle and held it up. "Looks like Santa's helpers found 2 more kids tonight," he said with a friendly grin. The tension in the alley slowly began to melt away. For the first time since the cruel words had been shouted at them earlier that evening, the twins felt something different. Hope. Jack stood up and held out his hand. "Come on," he said kindly. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The girls slowly stood up from the cold ground. Their small boots left tiny footprints in the snow as they walked toward him. And just like that, Christmas Eve was about to change completely for Mia and Lily. The quiet alley slowly came alive as Jack guided the twin girls toward the street. Snow continued, falling gently from the dark sky, covering the ground with a thin white layer that sparkled under the dim streetlights. The cold air still drifted through the narrow alley, but the moment no longer felt as lonely as it had only a few minutes earlier. Mia and Lily walked carefully beside Jack. Their small boots crunched softly in the snow as they stepped out of the alley and onto the street where the motorcycles were parked. For the twins, the sight was almost unbelievable. A long row of powerful motorcycles stood lined up along the snowy road. Chrome parts gleamed under the lights, and the dark shapes of the bikes looked huge from the girls' small perspective. They had never seen so many motorcycles in one place before. The bikers stood beside their machines, their heavy jackets and boots dusted with snow. But as the girls approached, their serious faces softened into warm smiles. One biker crouched slightly and waved. "Well, look who we found tonight," he said kindly. Mia held Lily's hand a little tighter as they looked around in amazement. Everything felt big. The bikes, the riders, the glowing headlights reflecting in the snow. But somehow, the moment didn't feel frightening anymore. It felt safe. Jack walked over to his motorcycle and brushed some snow from the seat with his glove. Then he turned back toward the girls. "You two must be freezing," he said. Before the girls could answer, one of the bikers stepped forward, holding a pair of thick wool gloves. "These should help," he said. He gently handed the gloves to Mia and Lily. The twins slipped them on quickly. The warmth immediately made their fingers feel better. Another biker walked over carrying 2 thick blankets from the back of his motorcycle. He carefully wrapped them around the girls' shoulders. "There we go," he said. "Much better." The twins looked at each other and smiled shyly. They weren't used to so many people helping them. But tonight felt different. Tonight, people actually seemed to care. Lily looked around at the motorcycles again. Her eyes were wide with curiosity. "Are those all yours?" she asked softly. One of the bikers laughed warmly. "Some of them," he said. "But tonight, they're all part of Santa's delivery team." The girls giggled quietly. The sound of their laughter felt like a small spark of joy in the cold winter night. Jack finished adjusting his motorcycle and turned back toward them. "All right," he said gently. "Let's get you somewhere warm." He carefully lifted Lily first and helped her sit on the front of the motorcycle seat. The bike looked enormous compared to her tiny frame, but Jack made sure she was sitting safely between the handlebars and his arms. "Right here," he explained calmly. "Hold on to this." Lily wrapped her gloved hands around the center handlebar. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Then Jack helped Mia climb onto the seat just behind her. He adjusted the blanket around both girls so the cold wind wouldn't reach them during the ride. "Comfortable?" he asked. The twins nodded. They had never been on a motorcycle before. But somehow they trusted Jack. He climbed onto the seat behind them, placing his arms carefully around the handlebars so the girls would remain protected between him and the bike. Behind them, the other bikers climbed onto their motorcycles as well. Helmets were pulled on, gloves tightened, engines checked. The quiet street filled with a sense of anticipation. Jack leaned slightly forward. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked with a small smile. The twins looked at each other. For the first time that night, their faces showed excitement instead of sadness. They nodded. Yes. Jack pressed the starter button. The motorcycle engine roared to life. The powerful rumble echoed through the snowy street, followed quickly by the sound of the other motorcycles starting as well. One by one, the engines came alive. The deep thunder of dozens of motorcycles filled the winter air. But instead of sounding intimidating, the noise felt almost protective, like a convoy preparing for an important mission. Jack looked down at the twins once more. "Hold tight," he said gently. The girls tightened their grip on the handlebars. Then, slowly, the convoy began to move through the snowy Christmas night. The motorcycles slowly rolled forward onto the snowy street as the convoy began moving through the quiet Christmas town. The deep rumble of the engines echoed gently between the buildings while the falling snow sparkled in the bright glow of the streetlights. Each snowflake drifted through the air like tiny crystals, glowing briefly before disappearing into the white blanket covering the ground. Jack kept the motorcycle steady as he carefully guided the bike down the icy road. In front of him, Mia and Lily sat close together on the seat, wrapped tightly in their warm blankets. Their small gloved hands held onto the handlebars, while Jack's arms formed a protective barrier around them. For the twins, everything felt completely new. The motorcycles, the lights, the sound of the engines rumbling beneath them. Earlier that night, they had been sitting alone beside a trash container, feeling cold, unwanted, and forgotten. But now they were part of something entirely different. A long line of motorcycles rode behind Jack, their headlights cutting through the falling snow as they moved slowly through the town streets. People inside nearby houses looked out through their windows when they heard the sound. Children pressed their faces against the glass, watching the unusual Christmas convoy ride past. Some people waved from their front doors. Others smiled in curiosity. The sight of dozens of bikers riding together through the snowy street was already unusual, but seeing two small girls riding safely with them made the moment even more special. Snow continued, falling softly from the sky as the motorcycles passed beneath rows of glowing Christmas decorations. Colorful lights hung between the lampposts and decorated trees stood in front of shops and houses. The town looked magical. For Mia and Lily, it felt almost like a dream. Lily leaned slightly forward. "Look," she said excitedly. She pointed toward a brightly decorated Christmas tree standing in front of a bakery. The tree sparkled with golden ornaments and glowing lights. Mia laughed softly. "I've never seen one that big," she said. Jack heard their voices over the sound of the engine and smiled quietly behind them. The twins' laughter was the first real sign that the sadness of earlier that evening was beginning to disappear. Only a short time ago, the girls had been sitting in silence, holding each other for warmth. Now their voices were filled with excitement. The convoy continued moving slowly through the town, careful not to rush on the icy roads. The snow beneath the motorcycle tires crunched softly as they turned onto the main street. The glow of shop windows illuminated the road, revealing warm scenes inside. Families sat together, eating dinner. Children played beside decorated Christmas trees. For Mia and Lily, the sight felt strange. They had watched scenes like that from outside before. But tonight, something felt different. They weren't alone anymore. Jack leaned slightly closer so the girls could hear him over the engine. "You doing okay up there?" he asked. The twins nodded quickly. "Yes." Lily said. Mia giggled. "This is fun." Jack chuckled quietly. "Glad to hear it." Behind them, the rest of the bikers rode in formation. Their powerful machines creating a steady rumble that echoed through the quiet town. The convoy turned onto another street where rows of houses glowed warmly under Christmas lights. The snow reflected the colorful lights, making the whole street sparkle. Mia looked around in amazement. "Where are we going?" she asked. Jack answered gently. "Somewhere warm." The girls exchanged a curious look. Jack continued. "And somewhere safe." The words carried a promise. For the first time that night, the twins felt something they hadn't felt earlier. Security, hope. The motorcycles continued, moving slowly through the peaceful town while the snow drifted down around them. The convoy was heading toward a place where warm lights, hot food, and kindness were waiting. And for Mia and Lily, Christmas Eve was finally beginning to feel like Christmas again. The convoy of motorcycles slowly turned onto the final street near the center of town. Snow still drifted softly through the night air, while the glow of Christmas lights reflected across the white-covered road. The deep rumble of the engines echoed gently between the buildings as the bikers carefully guided their motorcycles toward a small, brightly lit diner at the corner of the street. The building stood out immediately. Warm yellow light spilled from the large front windows, creating a welcoming glow that contrasted with the cold winter night outside. A small sign above the door flickered softly, and inside the diner, people could be seen moving around tables filled with food. This was where the bikers had planned to stop. Every year during their Christmas charity ride, they organized a special dinner for people in the town who needed help during the holidays. Families without homes. People struggling through difficult times. Anyone who needed a warm meal and a safe place for the night. Jack slowly pulled his motorcycle into the parking area beside the diner. One by one, the other bikers parked behind him, forming a long line of motorcycles along the snowy street. The engine shut off. Silence returned. Only the quiet whisper of falling snow remained. Jack carefully helped the twins climb down from the motorcycle. The blankets still wrapped around their shoulders kept them warm as they stepped onto the ground. Mia looked up at the diner window. Through the glass, she could see people sitting at tables with steaming plates of food in front of them. The warm light made the entire place feel safe. Lily sniffed the air. "It smells good," she said quietly. Jack smiled. "That's because it is." One of the bikers walked ahead and opened the diner door. A wave of warm air immediately rushed outside. The comforting smell of hot soup, roasted turkey, and freshly baked bread filled the entrance. "Come on in," the biker said with a grin. The twins stepped inside carefully. The moment they entered, the cold winter air disappeared behind them. The diner felt bright and cheerful. Christmas decorations hung along the walls. A large tree stood in the corner, decorated with glowing lights and colorful ornaments. People sitting at the tables looked up when the bikers entered. Some smiled. Others waved. Everyone in the room knew about the charity ride. The bikers did this every year. But tonight, there was something special about the two. Small girls standing beside Jack. One of the volunteers working in the diner approached them. She wore a warm red sweater and had a kind smile. "Well, hello there," she said softly. Jack explained quietly. "We found them sitting outside earlier tonight." The woman's eyes softened. "Oh my goodness," she said gently. She knelt down to the girl's level. "You two must be freezing." She led them to a small table near the window. "Let's fix that right away." Within minutes, 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate were placed in front of Mia and Lily. The sweet smell of cocoa filled the air. As warm steam rose from the cups, the girls wrapped their gloved hands around the mugs carefully. The warmth spread through their fingers. Mia took a small sip. Her eyes widened. "It's so good," she said softly. The volunteers laughed warmly. Soon plates of hot food were brought to the table. Warm soup, fresh bread, a slice of roasted turkey. The twins stared at the food for a moment, almost unsure if it was really meant for them. Jack pulled a chair nearby and sat down beside them. "Go ahead," he said kindly. The girls didn't need to be told twice. They began eating quickly, not because they were greedy, but because they had been hungry for a long time. The people inside the diner watched quietly. Some smiled. Others wiped their eyes. It was a simple moment. 2 little girls eating a warm meal. But the meaning behind it was much deeper. Only a few hours earlier, the twins had been sitting alone in a dark alley beside a trash container. Cold, hungry, believing nobody wanted them. Now they sat inside a warm room surrounded by people who cared. Lily looked up from her cup of hot chocolate and glanced at Jack. Her small voice was soft. "Thank you," she said. Jack smiled gently. "No problem." Mia looked around the diner. People were talking, laughing, sharing food. The Christmas tree lights sparkled in the corner. For the first time that entire day, the twins felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. They felt wanted. The night had grown quieter as the snowfall slowly continued across the small town. Outside the warm diner, the row of motorcycles still stood parked along the snowy street, their chrome surfaces lightly covered with a thin layer of fresh snow. The glow from nearby streetlights reflected off the white ground, making the entire street look calm and peaceful. Inside the diner, Mia and Lily had finally finished their warm meal. The girls sat quietly at the table for a moment, holding their mugs of hot chocolate as the warmth slowly returned to their bodies. The soft Christmas music playing in the background and the cheerful decorations around the room made the diner feel like the safest place in the world. Only a few hours earlier, the twins had been sitting alone in a dark alley beside a trash container, believing nobody in the world wanted them. Now they were surrounded by kindness. Jack stood near the counter, speaking quietly with one of the volunteers. The woman nodded while listening. "You said their mother is in the hospital?" she asked. Jack nodded. "That's what the girls told me." The volunteer gave a thoughtful look. "Well, if that's the case," she said gently, "maybe they should see her." Jack smiled slightly. "I was thinking the same thing." A few minutes later, the group stepped outside again. The cold winter air returned, but this time the twins were bundled warmly in thick jackets and scarves that the volunteers had given them. Snowflakes drifted slowly through the night sky. The motorcycles were ready once again. Jack helped the twins climb onto the seat of his motorcycle just like before, making sure they were wrapped securely in their blankets. "Ready for one more ride?" he asked. Mia and Lily nodded excitedly. The motorcycle engines roared back to life as the bikers started their bikes. The deep rumbling sound echoed softly through the quiet streets. Within minutes, the convoy was moving again through the snowy town. But this time, their destination was different. The hospital. The building appeared ahead at the end of the street, its bright lights shining through the winter night. Jack carefully parked the motorcycle near the entrance. The girls climbed down quickly. They hurried inside the hospital doors, guided by one of the nurses who had already been informed that the children were coming. The warm hospital hallway felt calm and quiet. After a few moments, the nurse led them into a small hospital room. Inside the room lay their mother. She looked tired, but when she saw the two small figures standing in the doorway, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Mia, Lily. The girls ran toward her, "Mom." They climbed carefully onto the bed and wrapped their arms around her in a tight hug. For a moment, none of them spoke. The reunion said everything. Jack stood quietly near the door, watching the moment unfold. The nurse smiled softly. After a few minutes, the twins turned around and ran back toward him. Without warning, they wrapped their arms tightly around Jack. "Thank you," they said together. Jack looked slightly surprised at first. Then he smiled warmly and gently patted their backs. "You're welcome, kids," he said. Mia looked up at him. "You saved Christmas." Jack chuckled quietly. He shook his head. "No," he said gently. "Everyone deserves a Christmas." The girls smiled. Outside, the bikers were already preparing to leave again. Jack stepped back into the snowy night and climbed onto his motorcycle. One by one, the engines started once more. The powerful machines roared softly under the falling snow. Jack glanced back toward the hospital entrance. Inside those doors, two little girls were finally safe, warm, with their mother. He pulled on his helmet and started the engine. The convoy slowly rode away down the quiet winter street, their headlights glowing through the snow as they disappeared into the night. And somewhere behind them, inside the hospital room, two small girls would remember that night forever. Because sometimes heroes don't wear suits. Sometimes they don't arrive with flashing lights or loud announcements. Sometimes they simply stop when they see someone who needs help. And sometimes those heroes ride motorcycles.